Thank you, Pastor Cunningham. My name is Brandon Porter. I'm the Communications Director for the Kentucky Baptist Convention. And the Lord has given me kind of a strange path through life. I've been a pastor here in Kentucky for 22 years, who always had this side gig of broadcasting and journalism that I could just not ever shake. I would try to get away from it, and it would never leave me alone. And so I'm the guy that in seventh grade was excited to take that current events quiz in civics every Friday, and the one who made the 100 every Friday, and the other kids made fun of me. And I didn't care because I was very happy to make 100 every Friday on that civics quiz. But the Lord, after many years, brought me to the spot to where those areas laid over top of each other, because at the Kentucky Baptist Convention, I'm not only allowed to work with our churches to help in communicating and resourcing and just coming alongside to partner with them, but I'm also allowed to be the editor of Kentucky Today. And so the opportunity to look through a Christian worldview at events, specifically those that are happening here in Kentucky. The Lord has allowed that to come together here in this role. So I have some slides. So being the communications guy, I thought we needed some slides, right? But then when I sat at the table, I thought this is going to be like being at home where Dad's over here talking and everybody's looking at the TV while I'm talking. So for those of you over on this side, I'm sorry, they're behind you, but you guys can see those. That you have some great places to take notes. I hope that you will take notes. The things that Pastor Cunningham has talked about. Oh man, I just blew it because I lost half the room there. I shouldn't have even said anything. But the things that Pastor Cunningham has shared, I've thought a lot about those things over this last month, and so thank you for sharing those. And I hope that you will hold on to those and be processing on them. I want to talk to you about a couple of ways to really bring them down to the ground and engage political leaders. And I'm thinking on a very local level as possible as we talk about this. The first thing I want us to remember is that Christians are called to bring light into the darkness. Sometimes when we engage politically, we think it is our job to point out all the darkness, all the things that are wrong in our community, all the things that are wrong in our neighborhood, all the things that are wrong in the Commonwealth. We've been called to bring light. We are called to be salt. And that includes our conversation and the way that we speak with political leaders, that we speak to political leaders, that we speak about political leaders. As we've thought about this conference and put it together, I began to think about those political leaders, and a thought that resonated in my mind is how we think of those that we disagree with often. Now, on one hand, if there was a child at risk of abortion, then we would go to great lengths to try to protect that child. And so that reminds us that as Christians, we believe that all people are created in God's image. And so this next slide says that Christians should value all people and show them dignity and respect as they're created in the image of God. I wonder if we think about our political leaders in that way when they're on the other side of the aisle. The unborn child, we have very little problem thinking about that, fighting, giving, going and serving and sacrificing on behalf of them. But I wonder what adjectives you would use for that political leader who disagrees with your position. Would you extend to them the same grace, the same dignity that you would extend to someone else? Or do you simply see them as a pawn to be used either to accomplish your purpose or a pawn that is standing in the way of the accomplishment of your purpose? And so I want you to think about political leaders as people, because that's who they are. They are people with families, with homes, who are serving your community, serving our commonwealth, serving our nation. And so as we think about that, here are some ways for us to engage. I've come up with an acronym based on the word speak, and I'm thinking as locally as I possibly can. Your local officials are busy people. In many of our local communities, they are not full-time. Your mayor, your city council member, your magistrates, they have a full-time job. They are working in a part-time capacity in this role. Most of them have families of their own. They're involved in personal things just like you are. So the first S, as we begin to think about this, is when you speak to them, speak specifically. You don't have to tell them every single thought and position that you have on every single issue that affects your community. If there is something on your mind that you want to engage about, that you want to speak to, be specific as you think, as you look for that opportunity to speak to them. They are busy people. Imagine if you ran into the grocery store to pick up something quickly for your family, and it took you 45 minutes to get out because somebody wanted to talk to you about the potholes that are all over your city streets. Speak specifically. Be respectful of them in their time. The second is P. It's personally. We've already heard about Facebook and Twitter. Make social media a last resort when you are communicating about your personal or about your local leaders, about your state leaders. Speak to them personally if you can. Those who are in the General Assembly, you have representatives that live there in your community. The first few months of the year are not the best times for you to communicate with them, even though they are sometimes very critical. But there are lots of other months where they are living and active in your community. They're not off in Frankfurt. They're right there at home. And you can find opportunities to speak with them personally. Speak with your mayor personally. Speak with the judge executive personally. Speak with the field rep for your U.S. senator or U.S. representative. They have people there locally in your area. Speak to them personally and avoid social media as a last resort. Then I would say E, expectantly. Expectantly. I think our attitude says a lot about how we engage. I wonder if we go into a conversation expecting them just to brush us aside or to treat us as if they don't really care anyway. You're a taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer. Our system of government is built on being represented. We ought to expect to be heard. That makes it even more important about how we should address, how we should be specific and conscious about their time and good stewards of their time, about our tone of voice. I think a lot of that connects to, do you really expect them to listen to you? You ought to expect them to listen to you, and so you ought to do your homework. You ought to be prepared, and you ought to honor them as you speak to them about the issue that is your concern. And then the A is affirmatively. Affirmatively. Rather than just telling them what you disagree about, I wonder if there is something that you can speak to that political leader about in an affirming way. I grew up in Georgia, and my grandfather on my dad's side was a small guy. He led me to faith in Jesus Christ. He is the one that really instilled Christian values into me in a very practical way. Every time we went to his home, he was the one that we would do. You know, you couldn't go to bed until you'd answered 15 Bible trivia questions, right? But Pop Bill, who was a meat cutter all of his life, small guy, but he didn't mind to tell you where he stood and what he thought. In his retirement, he ended up a school bus driver. And he drove a school bus there from Snellville, Georgia, into the city of Atlanta and took a group of school children to the Jimmy Carter Center. Pop Bill was not a Democrat. On this particular day that he took these school children to the Jimmy Carter Center, who of all people would be there at the Jimmy Carter Center other than Jimmy Carter himself? And so my grandfather, I can remember as a teenage boy, him telling us the story about how he helped the kids. He went in, he started the tour. Here comes the former president out. He's greeting the children. And my grandfather said, and I told him that I appreciated this and this and this, but I disagreed with him on this and this and this, and so I didn't vote for him. And I thought, first, that's brave. There's courage there to do that. But then I also thought, he knew some things that he could agree with President Carter on. He had some affirmative things to say. He didn't just throw him under the bus completely. He had some affirmative things to say. And that has shaped me. That has stuck with me over these many years. And so there are affirming things that we can say, even to leaders that we disagree with. That leads me to the A, affirmatively. Oh, that was the A, affirmatively. Sorry. My brain, I'm back there thinking about that being a kid again. K, kindly. K, kindly. Kindness goes a long way, right? Whether you're speaking to your mom or your dad or your brothers or sisters when you were a kid, all the way now to as we are in adulthood. Kindness goes a long way with people. Not only to say that we believe that they're valuable, that they're worthy of dignity and respect, but that we show that in our tone of voice, that we look them in the eye, that we treat them with respect. Kindness goes a long way. The Apostle Peter calls us to be respectful, to honor those who lead us. Even if you don't agree with them, he calls you to honor them and to be respectful of them. I want to share with you just quickly a couple of slides, and these are ways to communicate with your leaders. Most city and county governments have websites with contact information. Now, this is where Facebook is a great starting place because you can figure out how to connect with your mayor, with your city council, with your local magistrates, with your elected officials, with the local police department, whoever it is you're trying to track down. The local government has that. And if you will communicate with them, they will build a relationship. At the Kentucky Baptist Convention, we found that those who had built a relationship, pastors who had built a relationship with their mayors and their judge executives, many of them were called by their mayors and their judge executives with questions about how they should deal with the COVID pandemic. What should we do? How should we group people? How should we create rules? How should we lead? Because it was hard, and they knew pastors dealt with groups of people all the time. There are wonderful websites on our state government's page where you can find information, and that slide was just up. There are pages where you can find your U.S. senators, your U.S. representatives, and you can contact them, again, keeping these principles in mind. In my last few minutes, I want to speak to pastors. And if you are not a pastor, then I would encourage you to think about these things and to take this good word back to your pastor. And the good word is this, is that pastors have more influence in their communities than they realize. Pastors have more influence in their communities than they realize. God has placed them in those communities for their church, but also for the good of that community where they live. People pay attention to pastors out in the community. You say, how do you know that? Well, I know that because for 7 years when I pastored in Glasgow, Kentucky, every time I walked into the barber shop, the barber would eventually stop the coarse jokes that were being told because he knew I was a pastor. And over a period of time, that the time that he allowed those jokes to be told was less and less and less. To where by just a couple of years into it, the minute I opened the door, the first word out of the barber's mouth was preacher, and the whole barbershop would go quiet. You carry that influence, pastors, into your community. Use it well. Pastors have the answers to big questions. Political leaders struggle. They have to make decisions that maybe half the community is not going to like, but the other half wants. They are forced to make decisions that have big ramifications on people, on their lives, on their livelihoods, on their businesses. They struggle. They are looking for someone to process, to think through. You have to start that through relationship. Not at the moment of tension, but you begin to build that relationship with them as you move forward. Pastors have the heart of a shepherd. Pastors love their communities. They love people. That's valuable. Not everybody loves people in their community. Sometimes people want to just get away from everybody else. Pastors want to love. They want to care for people. That is a great and valuable resource for a local community, for political leaders to understand that, to see modeled out, and then to learn from that, to draw from the wisdom of a shepherd. And pastors lead people who want to see the kingdom of God. One of the things that has impacted me most is the line in the Lord's Prayer, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And if I can get a group of people in a local church to go with me as we move out into the community who truly want to see our community reflect the kingdom of heaven, then that makes for a wonderful leader who can impact the local community in wonderful ways for the cause of Christ and for the good of that community. Thank you.